Good afternoon. My name is Ashley Ward. I am the Engagement and Outreach Associate with the Internet of Water. Today, I'm talking about stakeholder engagement, but specifically stakeholder engagement around technology adoption or data product development. Why is there a need to distinguish between these two concepts, stakeholder engagement writ large and stakeholder engagement around technology adoption? Stakeholder engagement for technology adoption requires the integration of traditional stakeholder engagement methods, user-centered design best practices, education, and a variety of other concepts across several disciplines. Now, you might think, isn't user-centered design also based on engagement? Well, yes, it is, but it is centered on the singular user. Stakeholder engagement is broader, and it takes into account different entities that will interact with the products or systems developed to achieve a certain set of outcomes. These entities are themselves independent. Sometimes they have conflicting objectives. They are part of a larger community and context. In other words, the output of our projects are no longer designed to answer a question for a user, but instead they are more of a service designed for multiple stakeholders to interact with and through. These products are often systemic, meaning they're designed with multiple stakeholders in mind, and they consider value, which requires thought about the value to the organization, but also the value to the individual stakeholder groups. So like, what is the benefit of modern water data infrastructure? Stakeholders have goals and limitations that are outside of user-centered design. Part of an early stakeholder engagement process then is to identify what value looks like to each of these groups. So what does this look like in practice? Here are a few tips. Carefully identify your stakeholders. Community does not mean general public. It means the community your project serves directly. Is it decision makers? Is it boundary organizations that serve other individuals? Set aside time in your design process to accurately identify who needs to be at the table, who controls the resources that can bring the project to life, who will be in charge of maintaining and sustaining the product once it's developed. Let me give you an example. In one of our projects, the steering committee believed that the primary audience for the data product, and in this case, it was a dashboard about water, they believed the primary audience was the general public, residents of that community. What they found during the engagement process, though, was that individuals in the general public were not their primary audience. Why? It isn't because these individuals don't care about their water. Of course they do. It was because they are burdened with so many other obligations that they don't have time to regularly engage with the dashboard to learn more. What they do is rely upon boundary organizations to tell them when there is something they need to know. They raise the flag, so to speak. So the true stakeholder in this scenario is the boundary organization who can process the information, highlight what the individual residents that they serve need to know, and deliver the information in a way that is meaningful and accessible. And I say accessible because many residents in this project did not actually want a dashboard. They don't have computers at home or have reliable access to internet. They rely upon information distributed through other non-digital means or via email. It's important to match your engagement framework with the objectives of the project. The development of products needs to fit within the capacity of the stakeholders. Asking stakeholders to take on more of a burden than they can do easily is a way to undermine your engagement process. This means that sometimes a participatory approach is not the best approach. Sometimes it looks more like traditional community engagement, in which there's time spent gathering information through interviews, for example, then development of a data product, and then a return to the stakeholders for a series of usability and functionality testing. So while the stakeholders in that scenario are not intimately involved with the development of the product, they are involved to the extent to which they are capable and willing, and they shape the design in meaningful ways. Do not confuse engagement with education. Education generally means the flow of knowledge comes from a particular direction. There's an educator and then there's a student. Education, though, helps those of us that lead stakeholder engagement better understand how people absorb information. But in and of itself, education is not stakeholder engagement. Do educators engage? Yes, they do. But what we want to see in this process is experts becoming integrated with stakeholders so that the exchange of knowledge is circular, not hierarchical. This is particularly important for engagement around technology. There is a diverse range of knowledge about technology that may provide a barrier for stakeholders during the engagement process. My recommendation is to offer a Data 101 type of opportunity in which stakeholders can willingly participate. In this case, it is understood that this is an educational activity within the overall engagement process in which stakeholders voluntarily participate based on their self-assessment of their own needs. It is also important that as leaders of the engagement process, we provide information in the form of videos or written materials that stakeholders can digest at their own pace. Using stakeholder engagement, though, as an educational opportunity upsets that dynamic that you're trying to achieve to be circular rather than hierarchical. Speaking about how people absorb information, it is critical that we consider several factors. Perspective. People approach all information from certain perspectives. This is not a surprise to any of you, but just like we as experts, scientists, researchers, we all operate within a perspective, so do our stakeholders. And while we all understand logically that perception does not equal reality, it can have a large impact on how we engage with others, how they absorb information, and how they engage with us. So taking the time to speak to people individually about their thoughts goes a long way in helping you, as you lead engagements, gain awareness of the often competing, but nearly always impactful perspectives of your stakeholders. And this can't happen typically in a group context. The gap instinct. This was first defined by Hans Rosling from Gapminder. The gap instinct is the tendency to think at extremes instead of in the gray areas. It is important that we recognize that we all think this way, but so do those with whom we engage. Understanding what those extremes are can help you guide the conversation toward the much more likely gray area, and that's where you find common ground. For example, with cloud services, I find that folks are either in the camp that says cloud services are great, affordable, they're safe, or they're in the camp that says cloud services are unknown, I don't know about them, I'm unsure, they're unsafe. When in truth, there's a lot of area between those two extremes. The real progress happens when we can identify the extremes and work to bring people into the much larger gray area for discussion. Trust. I saved the most important one for last. When it comes to developing technical products or adopting new technical frameworks, source matters. We could develop the most sophisticated product that would solve the most difficult challenge. But if stakeholders have no trust in who is providing the data or who is maintaining the product, they won't use it. Sustainability of any technology product relies upon a trusted provider. And particularly when it comes to managing resources like most of us are working on, that dynamic can already be fraught and complicated and political. So typically close or participatory stakeholder engagement is designed to actually address those dynamics and resolve them when user-centered design is not. So where do you go from here? How do you develop sustainable, effective engagement around technology adoption? First, you build evaluation into the process. User-centered design does this very well. Stakeholder engagement does not. At dedicated points in time, you should be evaluating your project. And this evaluation should include three main components. Process evaluation. Was the engagement process effective? Did the stakeholders feel like they had ownership of at least part of the process? Do the stakeholders feel good about this process? Process evaluation. 2, product evaluation. The usability and functionality of any technical product is a must-do. And this must be more than a survey. I know that's what lots of us use, but why is that? Because if you have stakeholders that really enjoyed the process, they're likely going to give themselves a great big thumbs up on the product. But that doesn't mean the product actually does what it was meant to do. Using techniques such as eye tracking or different evaluation techniques that are meant to determine if users interpret the outcome of the product correctly or if they can efficiently find information using the product. These are good ways to counter the bias of a great engagement process and help you really understand if the product itself does its job. So process evaluation, product evaluation, and then finally, impact evaluation. Remember when I said that value was an important part of these projects? Conducting impact evaluations is going to be critical in helping you make the case that this technology adoption or data product development was beneficial, that it was worth the investment, that you can use to advocate for further funding and support for this project. Unfortunately, evaluation is often an afterthought. That is a huge mistake. Because once the moment is past, it is no longer possible to gather the information about process, product, impact if the structure to do so wasn't already in place. Sustainability. Establish quickly and early on where the data product will live, who is in charge of maintaining the product, what will it cost, what are the capacities of that organization of where the product will live. Do the stakeholders trust that entity or organization? Where are people going to call when they have a question about the product? Who's going to pick up the phone? So do not contribute to the graveyard of products that are out there, developed, super cool, useful for about a year. Then because no one has ownership, it's never updated or technical issues can't be resolved. So it's no longer useful. You all know what I'm talking about. There's thousands of them. Third, set clear goals. Help your stakeholder group identify the audience for the product or for the outcome of the project. Establish the questions that the product or the system is designed to address, and then determine what data is required to answer those questions. Who provides that data? How is it ingested into the overall system or infrastructure that you're creating? There is so much to be gained for thoughtful engagement around technology adoption or data product development. Successful efforts at engagement can transform a diverse group of stakeholders into an assembly for change that has the influence and credibility to achieve real, lasting, sustainable results. For us, as leaders of engagement, sustainability should be one of our primary goals. This means that the project does not require our constant presence to succeed. It means that once we move on, and inevitably we do, there is a framework in place that the project survives and thrives. This concept is critical to overall community and stakeholder engagement. Too often, researchers enter a community and extract great information and labor, like engaging community members in data collection. And then they leave the community, they publish their papers, they advance their careers, they get future funding, and the community is the same as it was before. This undermines future engagements, it demoralizes the community, and ultimately it fosters distrust of science. We have an ethical obligation to think critically about how we engage with stakeholders in ways that are healthy and productive for both science and the stakeholder. So with careful engagement around technology adoption, we can not only achieve the outcomes of individual projects, we can institute the broad behavioral and structural change that is necessary to usher in this new era of water management, sustained and supported by modern water data infrastructure. Thank you, and I look forward to your questions.